So with all the other three-piece 90-degree elbows that we had done, I thought we'd do something a little bit different this time. And what we're going to do is a flat oval 90-degree twist elbow, three-piece. So let's get started here drawing in our elevation view. The bottom is going to be a 4-inch diameter with 2 inches of straight on it. So we're going to start off here and we're going to draw in our elevation view. So we know that if it's a 4-inch diameter, we got 2 inches, and then we got another 2 inches and another 2 inches. So that's going to represent what that actually looks like. So actually, let's draw that in. We've got 2-inch and 2-inch, and that leaves me with a 2-inch straight here. So that's going to represent what that half plan view looks like. And we're going to give this a center line radius. So I'll start with the center here. We're going to give this a center line radius of 6 inches. And now we're going to draw the plan view up here for half of this plan. Now this one here is going to go from a 3-inch diameter with 1.5 inches straight. So we're going to start off here first of all showing our 3-inch. And we're going to have 1.5 inches straight. So we've got half of that. So that means we're coming out here 3/4 of an inch. So we have 3/4 of an inch here. So that represents half of our straight. And then we're going to put our 3-inch diameter on here. And we'll divide it up as well. Now we're going to show our miter line. So we got a 3-piece. So we know that that's going to end up being 22.5 degrees. So we're going to take any distance we feel is greater than half. We're going to scribe the arc. And then we can project these points up. And then as we've done with the other ones, we can draw this in. And that's going to show me what that elevation view looks like as I go from this flat oval to this flat oval up here. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to develop our collar. So down here, we're going to start off with our line and do our stretch out for this collar. So we're going to put our seam in here on all 3 pieces. So the next thing I need to do is identify these pieces. We're going to put this one on center. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. I don't need to complete the other side because I know if this is on center, one side is going to be exactly the same as the other. So that means then that when I'm going to start off with this collar stretch out, I want to start off here and we're going to start at 1 and start to stretch it out. So I know that from 1 here, that represents 1/4 of my circumference. So when I take my 4-inch times pi, I end up with 12 9/16. And if I divide that by 4, because I only want 1/4, then I get 3 1/8. So that's what we're going to mark on here. We're going to mark on our 3 1/8. And then I know I'm going to have my 2-inch straight. So I'm going to mark that on here. Then I'm going to have half my circumference. So if I take 12 9/16 divided by 2, it gives me 6 1/4. And then I know I got that 2-inch straight. And I know that I now have another 1/4. So I know that that's going to be 3 1/8. So let me mark these on here for you. Then I know I want to divide this up into 3 equal divisions. So when I come across here, anything that I know is divisible by 3. And we know that we want to divide this by 6. And then we want to transfer our distances over here. So as we can do with this parallel line collar, because we know that it's straight, I can simply take these distances and transfer them over here. So let's first identify all our points. And then we can transfer them over to here. And that's going to give me the stretch out for that collar. Now let's do the stretch out for this column. So we know that this one here is going to be a 3-inch diameter. I have 1.5 inches straight on here. Our seam is going to go in here again. So let's identify our points. This point right here is going to represent the center line for my plan, as is this one over here. Remember, this is only showing half, so 3/4 and then 3/4 and then the other half of our circle. So we're going to start with the center line there. We're going to call it the center line, and I'm going to identify this as A, and then back to our center line. So that means that that is where we're actually going to start with. We're going to start here with that center line. And I know I'm going out to half our center line. Then we got half our circle. Then we're going to have the center line, the other half, half our circle, and then our straight. So let's start by marking that off here. So I know that that is half that 1.5 inches, so that's going to be 3/4. Then I have half my circle. So half, full circle, 3 times pi is 9 7/16. So I got 4 11/16 for half. 4 11/16. And then I'm going to have my 1.5 inches, 4 11/16, and 3/4. So we're starting here. I know that that's going to be my 3/4. Then I'm going to have half my circumference, which is 4 11/16. Then I have my full straight, which I know is going to be 1.5 inches. Then we have half our circumference again, which is 4 11/16. And then I know that I have my 3/4 on here. Now we want to divide that up into its equal divisions. And we want to identify these points as to the number sequence that we've got here. So I started with the center line. I'm going to end with my center line. And then we're going to plug in the rest of the numbers as we go around here. So we're going to go A. And then we're going all the way to the other side. I can put the center line in there if I want to, but it's not necessary. So now we're basically going to start to go back the other way. And then we're going to step off this collar to develop it over here. So I'm going to take the distance for the center line. And I'll draw in the rest of that for you. So I stepped all those points off for you, drew in the line so that you can see what that stretch out is actually going to look like. The one thing you want to keep in mind is when I took those distances and stepped them off, the one mistake that gets made is we forget that this is where we're actually taking our distances from when we step off our collar going across here. The mistake often happens sometimes as we go back out to here because we're so used to working off of just a half plan. So we want to make sure that we're working off here. That's why I designated that as the center line for this fitting. And again, we need those collars, don't we, in order to develop what the stretch out for this is actually going to look like. So let's get started over here, and we're going to start to develop our pattern. So I'm going to start off over here with the line, and we're going to start off here with a point on that line. And as I said, this one's on center, so we know that one side is going to be exactly the same as the other. The other nice thing, if you remember about the center line, is we said that the first line is always a true length line. So I can start with that. I know that if it's on center, I can use that distance right there, and we can step it off. That now gives me my 2 points that I can work from in order to develop this pattern. I know that that's going to be 8. And I know that that's coming up to that center line that we have here. It's also going to be the same for G as we come up here, other than the fact that we have a difference coming across here. So that is the true length for 8 to center line. Okay, so now we want to come up from 8 to find G. So we're going to do it again, except it's coming off this far. So as I had done with some of the other ones when I was doing the center line method, we took the distance from here, this half plan, and I subtracted it from this half plan down here. So when I do that, because there's nothing to subtract as far as 8 is concerned, I use the whole distance of G. So that is going to be 8 to find G. And we're going to triangulate now to find its true length. So I take this distance from 8 now to G. I'm going to put it out on its right angle triangle. I'm going to identify it as 8 to find G. And there's the amount that we're going to triangulate over here. So now we're going to go from 8 to find G. And we know it's the same on both sides. So now I'm going to take that distance from the miter line side of my collar up here, which is just a straight line, and we're going to step it off. And if I started correct, this should be a straight line across here through all 3 of those points. Now I know that I'm starting correctly as I go through this fitting. Now we're going to go from G down to 7. Now we're going to take the distance from G. I'm going to subtract it from 7. There's the difference that I see that I want to triangulate over. So I'm going to take that distance now, and that's going to represent G to 7. I'm going to take the foreshortened length. I'm going to place it on its right angle triangle. I'm going to identify it as G to find 7. There's the difference that we're triangulating over right there. And now I have G here and here. So we're going to go from there, scribe the arc, and scribe the arc. We're going to take the distance from 8 to 7, and we're going to step it off. And it's the same on both sides. Now we're going to go from 7 to F. So when I take a look now, I got to remember that I'm using this half plan right here. That's important to remember because we've got that straight section on here. Very common mistake that gets made is we take it from here out and subtract it, when in reality, that is representing half of its plan view. So we want to make sure that we take that distance that we see right here. The other thing you'll notice is that when we started, I actually used this very first line twice. I used it once to find the center and then once to go out and find G. So we ended up using this distance, and we're going to end up using this distance here. Very important to remember when we're taking these differences. Okay, so as I said, now we're going to go from 7 up to find F. So we're going to take the distance from 7 to F. I'm going to put it on its right angle triangle. And we're going to identify it as 7 to find F. And then we're going to take the distance for F. So now remember, we're taking that whole distance here, and we're going to step it off, and I'm going to go from 7 to F. Now there is the difference that I'm actually going to triangulate over right there. So with the flat oval fittings, sometimes it gets a little confusing when we're subtracting that difference. Remember, I subtracted it from here. So that now is going to be 7 to find F. And from there, from that difference, I'm going to go here to our 7F. And we're going to go from 7, scribe the arc. We're then going to take the distance off the miter line side of the collar. So I'm going from G to F. Again, you can see the importance of making sure we follow the correct number sequence because we're taking it off the miter line side of the collar. And we're going to step it off here. And that's going to give me F. Then I'm going to go from F down to 6. We're going to take the foreshortened length of F to 6. I'm going to put it out on its right angle triangle. I'm going to identify it as F to find 6. We're going to take the full half plan here of F, and we're going to subtract it from 6. And that is going to show me that difference from F to find 6. Then we're going to take that distance, and we're going to go from F to 6. Take the distance off the miter line side of the collar. Then we're going to go from 6 up to E. I'm going to take the foreshortened length, 6E. I'm going to place it on its right angle triangle. I'm going to identify it as 6 to find E. I'm going to take half, and I'm going to subtract it from 6. And what you can see here is there's the difference right there. That is going to be the difference for 6 to find E. There's 6 to E. And we're going to triangulate over that distance. And we're going to go from 6. Now we'll take the distance off the miter line side of the collar. So now we're going from F to E. And now we're going to go from E down to 5. I'm going to take the foreshortened length of E5. I'm going to put it on its right angle triangle. We're going to identify it as E to find 5. I'm going to take the distance for E. I'm going to subtract it from 5. Wow, look at that. It's almost a true length. I'm going to go E to find 5. And we're going to take that distance from E to 5 and scribe the arc. And now we're going to go from 5 up to D. We're going to take the foreshortened length of 5 to find D. I'm going to put it on its right angle triangle. I'm going to identify it as 5 to find D. We're going to take the distance of D and we're going to subtract it from 5. So we're now going from 5 to find D. And as you can see, there's the difference that we're working with right here. So we're going to take that 5 to D, and we're going to go from 5 up to locate D. Then we're going to go from E to 4. We take the foreshortened length, D to 4. I place it on its right angle triangle, identify it as D to find 4. I take half the plan, I subtract it from 4. That's going to be D to find 4. There's the difference that we're triangulating over right there. So we're going to take that, finding the true length from D4, and we're going to go from D and scribe the arc. And now we're going to go from 5 to 4. So we're going right across that straight section represented by my flat oval. And we're going to go from 5. And that's going to locate for me 0.4. Then I'm going to go from 4 up to find C. We take the foreshortened length, 4C. I put it on its right angle triangle, identify it as 4 to find C. We're going to take half of the plan. I'm going to subtract it from 4. Look at that, right on that line. That doesn't always happen. Then we take the true length. So we took the distance from 4 to C. We put it out here. And it's right there. So it is a true length. And we're going to go from 4 and that's going to give us C. Then we're going to go from C to 3. Again, you can see that once we get started, it becomes very repetitive. Over and over again, we're following the exact same rules, putting it out on its right angle triangle, identifying those points as we do so. We know that that is now going to be C down to find 3. We're going to take half of C. I'm going to subtract it from 3. We're going to identify it as C to find 3. And then we're going to triangulate to find its true length. And we'll go from C down here Then we're going to go from 3 up to B. We take the foreshortened length, 3 to B. We place it on its right angle triangle. We're going to identify it as 3 to find B. And then we're going to take half of the plan, subtract it from 3. So now that is 3 to find B. There's the difference that we're looking for right here. So we're going to take that distance from 3 and scribe the arc to B. Then we're going to go from B to find 2. We're going to take the foreshortened length of B to 2. I'm going to put it out on its right angle triangle. We're going to identify it as B to find 2. I'm going to take half of B. I'm going to subtract it from 2. So that is B to find 2. There's the difference. So we're going to take that from B to 2. And this is where we have to pay attention again, because now I'm going from 2 to find A. Going from 2 to find A, not the center line. We're going from 2 up to find A. So we're going to take that foreshortened length of 2 to A. We're going to put it out on its right angle triangle. I'm going to identify it as 2 to find A. And we're going to take now the distance for A and subtract it from 2. So this was 2 to A. And there's the difference that we're triangulating over right there, from 2 to A, and out here to 2 to A. So we're going to take that distance and we're going to go from 2 to find A. That's why having these numbers and letters becomes so important as far as making sure that we stay on track as we're going from one to the other. Now we're going to go from A down to 1. So we're going to go from A down to 1. We're going to take the foreshortened length, A1. So we want to pay attention here because we're following this line, so it can easily be mistaken for our center line, but it isn't. We're going from A to 1. So I'm going to put it on its right angle triangle. I'm going to identify it as A to find 1. And we're going to take the difference here, again, for A. So now when I put that on here, there is nothing to subtract from A. So we're going to use the complete or total distance of A. So that is going to be for A1. And we're going to triangulate over that distance. And we're going to go from A and scribe the arc. Now we're going back from 1 again, but now we're going back to the center line. So when I take that distance now from 1 to my center line, there is nothing to subtract. So just as we had started, it's a true length line. So now we're going to go from 1, scribe the arc. And that is going to complete that pattern. So one thing that we want to remember is that we know that the distance between 4 and 5 is a straight line. And I also know that up here, between A and my center line, is a straight line. And obviously, as we started, that was our center line, straight line going across here as well. And then the rest is a curved line. We know that obviously this is from 1 to our center line is also going to be a straight line. And at this point in time, it's also good to mark on where we're actually going to break this, because now this represents from 1 out to A and to our center line. So with a flat oval fitting, we tend to crease them a little bit because I know that I'm going to be rolling it in here. So I know that with this one from 8 to G, we're going to break along this line. And it's just a small crease. It helps us to identify where that flat section is so that when we're forming it up in the shop, we know that we stop our roll at that point. And the same thing is going to occur over here. And when we take a look at 4 and 5 right here, they both share D. So that means that from here to D is going to be a crease. And from here to D is also going to be a crease. And then we're going to roll in between there. So give me a sec and I'll draw that line in for you. And that's going to show me exactly what that looks like. So I would crease on these points here. I would roll this. That would ensure me that I get the correct shape as I try to assemble this flat oval fitting. We would add whatever seams and allowances we wanted to put on here, and it would complete this pattern. Thanks for watching.